Oh flats, how do I hate you? Let me count the ways. Flats are mega tedious and I hate them, but one way or another they need to get done. So let's figure out how to do them so we can move on. Hey, Walter here with a new how to make comics video, and this one is about flatting. Now flats are super simple, but they are time consuming and thus energy sapping, but they have to get done. So I've tried to streamline my process as much as possible. Now, if you like my videos and would like to support me, consider checking out my Patreon or just sharing my videos with your friends. Anybody who does gets a digital high five. Now let's get started with what exactly are flats. Flats are color blocking an image, assigning a color to each element of the image or page. And the reason we do this is to speed up the coloring process. Like we could lasso select shirt, color it and be done. But what if we decided we wanted to go back and change the shirt color? We'd have to reselect it all over again. So creating the flats is annoying and time consuming, but hopefully it makes the coloring process quicker and more enjoyable when we can spend all of our energy on the creative side of things. So I just want to clear something up here. This is what I think of when I think of flats, simply isolating different parts of an image. Sometimes the term flatting is used for this, which I think of more as base colors. It's a tiny distinction, but I'll talk more about that later. How do we flat? Flatting is pretty simple. It's just time consuming and mind numbing and soul draining. Aren't you super excited to get flatting? So this is the method I've used for years. Now Clip Studio has come along and drastically changed my life and my process, but I wanted to go over this method because it will work with pretty much any drawing program out there. All of them should have these tools. They might just be in different places or called different things. I'm going to be showing you in Photoshop, but you should be able to find these things in any program you're using. Now, if you use Clip Studio and you use the process that I'm going to show you later, you might still want to watch this part of the video because it will give you a little bit more of an understanding of the mechanics behind flatting. All right, this is the lasso tool method. Now, before we start, you want to turn anti-alias off on the lasso, magic wand, and paint bucket tool. This creates a nice sharp edge for our selections. The first thing we do is create a new layer on top of our line art layer. Set the layer type to multiply. We do this so the line art can be seen through the color. Now I like to fill the entire flat layer first. Just pick any color and fill it just to make sure that there are no empty spots when we move forward. Next, grab the lasso tool. I prefer the freehand tool. Other people prefer the straight line. It doesn't really matter. I just think the freehand tool is quicker. Now just select individual pieces and fill it with a new color. So you'd want to select this guy's shirt in every panel and then fill it. This is where the flats and the base colors come into play. If you are flatting, you can simply hue shift the color to whatever you want, neon pink, sour green. However, if you're doing the base colors during your flatting, you'll have to find the appropriate color. This is slightly more time consuming but can save time later, so it's all personal preference. So just repeat that for every element. Now this is kind of a side note. I'm lazy, stylish. So I like to flat really quickly and sometimes I go outside of the lines, but this makes things look edgy and fresh. It's also quicker to do. This is one of those do what you want lessons. Few tricks with the lasso tool are the selection method, which are these 4 buttons. New creates a new selection, removing current selections. I hardly ever use this. Next is the add, which adds a selection to any current selections. This is where I usually leave it. Next is subtract, which of course subtracts from any current selections. I use this, but I just hold Alt on my keyboard and it changes add to subtract. And then when I let go of Alt, it changes back to add. If you use a Wacom or a stylus, you may be able to map Alt to your stylus button if you have one. Otherwise, use your keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts are amazing, so you should learn them and use them. So you have the lasso tool on add. You start selecting objects. If you accidentally go outside of the lines, use Alt and deselect that mistake. Keep moving forward. Another useful trick is to select a large element. Then start selecting smaller and smaller elements inside of that larger element. This can save us a little time, so let's do this. Let's select this entire character, give him a color. Now let's select his hair. We only need to lasso the part of his hair that touches any other part of him. But outside of that, we don't have to have a precision select. We can just do a huge select outside of him. Now, if we grab the magic wand tool and use the intersect selection method, we can make sure to set it to intersect, and then we limit our current selection to the select we just made of the huge element. So this basically limits our select to the object of the character. Keep using this method and work your way down. When you're doing this, make sure you select every instance of a character or of that object across the entire page so that you save yourself some time. Okay, I know that's a lot of information, but trust me, the more you do it, the quicker and more natural it will become. However, if you have Clip Studio, then you have access to a ton of intelligent color and selection tools, which will really speed up the process. And you don't even need the more expensive Clip Studio version. You can get the cheaper basic version. And Clip Studio has a sale like every few months, and I think you can get the basic version for about 25 bucks, which is insanely cheap for the amount of things it can do. So save up and then you'll be able to use these tools. So how do we use these tools? We start off the same. We have our line art layer and we have our flat layer. Let's start off with a fill color into the flat layer. Now let's Harry Potter the crap out of this. Select the paint bucket tool and set the fill method to refer to other layers. Now look at the settings. Make sure the following are turned on: follow adjacent pixel, close gap, and area scaling. Finally, turn off anti-aliasing. You don't have to set these all the time. It will store them once you have set them. Make sure you're on the flats layer. Now pick a color for any object and simply paint bucket that object. Boom, it's flatted. Now if you lower the opacity of the line layer, you can see that the color is going under the line, so you don't get any ugly empty white areas. Something else to pay attention to are areas where you might have hash marks. Because we have close gap turned on, it will interpret these lines as new areas, so you'll either have to paint bucket those little areas or just quickly lasso that small area and hit Alt Delete to do a quick fill. You could also lower the close gap size to attempt to fill into those little areas. These smart features can also be set on the magic wand tool. Learn how to use both of them together to make flatting super fast, or at least super not as slow as the lasso method. So some notes on the settings. Close gap, you'll see this little section right here. This sets the width for the close gap. So the smaller the setting, the less it will try to close. The bigger setting, the bigger gaps it will close. So you might need to move this around depending on what your drawing looks like. If you have a gap that is too big for close gap to fill, you can always use the lasso tool to close that gap, and then you select wide around that area and use the paint bucket tool as normal. And with area scaling, this is basically telling the program how far under a line it wants to go. So I usually have it set to 11, but depending on what your art looks like and how thick or thin your lines are, you'll need to adjust this setting. Okay, so that's how you do it in Clip Studio. Pretty simple, right? But I do have one last method, which is using this website. All you have to do with the website is upload your image and it spits out the flats into a file, which you can import into your original image. It's super quick. You might have to do a little bit of cleanup depending on how complicated your line work is. I haven't really used this method, not for any particular reason. Maybe my line work is a little messy, so this might not work very well. But if you try it out or if you used it before, I would like to hear what you think of it. Oh yeah, one last final method is hiring somebody to do the flats for you. In my experience, flatting costs about 10 to 15 US per page. If you do want to hire a flatter, check Facebook pages or Reddit or art communities. Reach out to a colorist to see if they'll let you know who their flatter is. So that's flatting. A bit of a nightmare, but it's a necessity for coloring, which is going to be the topic of the next video. So make sure you sub so you don't miss that video. If something wasn't clear, let me know and I will try to help you in the comments. And be sure to like, link, love, hug, and sub for more sweet, sweet goodness. Peace.